The human mind is a landscape of extremes. It is capable of profound peace and sudden, terrifying upheaval. We often mistake our internal state for the fixed reality of the world around us. This is the first and most crucial deception we must overcome. We live in an age of unprecedented connectivity, yet internal solitude has never felt so vast. The storms we face are no longer just external, the economic crisis, the political turmoil. They are intimately, relentlessly personal. They manifest as anxiety that grips the chest, as the swirling chaos of relentless, negative thought patterns. Consider the metaphor of the sea. On the surface, waves crash and foam, a violent, unpredictable dance of energy. But beneath that churning surface, in the deep, a profound stillness persists. This documentary is an investigation into that deep, internal stillness. It is a quest to understand how the most resilient among us, those who navigate loss, trauma, and constant pressure, access that inner core of calm. The hook is simple, yet devastatingly true. Everyone is fighting a storm you cannot see. The question is not how to avoid the storm, for that is impossible. The question is how to become the calm eye at the center of the hurricane, a silent observer in the midst of internal anarchy. We are not seeking mere coping mechanisms or temporary distractions. This investigation demands a structural, fundamental shift in the way we perceive and process reality. It requires training the mind like an elite athlete, conditioning it for endurance, precision, and, above all, quiet strength. The journey starts with a simple acknowledgement. The greatest storm you will ever weather is the one raging inside your own head. Our exploration begins now, tracing the historical and neurological roots of human distress. This is the blueprint for mastering the mental tempest. We will examine case studies, scientific breakthroughs, and ancient philosophies, seeking the common thread that links psychological fortitude across centuries and cultures. The goal is to move from being a victim of the storm to becoming its masterful conductor. The idea of internal mastery is not a modern self-help concept. It is a foundational pillar of human thought. For millennia, philosophers and spiritual leaders have grappled with the problem of human suffering and the path to ataraxia, a state of serene, unperturbed clarity. The Stoics, in ancient Greece and Rome, built an entire ethical framework around this very pursuit. They taught that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the view we take of them. This was their radical claim, an early form of cognitive reappraisal. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire under constant threat, famously wrote his meditations as a series of mental exercises. They were not for public consumption, but a private manual for training his mind to remain impervious to external fortunes. His calm was not a lack of emotion, but a disciplined rejection of unnecessary distress. It was an acknowledgement that while fate may take everything, it cannot take the power of his judgment. Across the globe, in the axial age, Buddhism offered a different, yet parallel, path through the concept of nirvana, a cessation of the suffering caused by attachment. The practice of meditation, at its core, is a laboratory for internal calm. It is a direct exercise in watching the storm of thoughts and feelings without being swept away by it. It reveals the transient nature of mental states. What these historical paths share is a profound understanding of the internal locus of control. They recognize that the only true, sustainable sanctuary is found within the mind itself. The historical context shows us that the modern epidemic of anxiety is not a new problem. It is an eternal human challenge, repackaged for a complex technological world. We are rediscovering ancient truths under the pressure of modern living. This deep, historical perspective provides a vital ballast against the current of instant gratification culture. It reminds us that the work required is slow, deliberate, and timeless. The methods are proven, tested by millennia of human experience. Our next step is to understand the contemporary science that validates these ancient insights. To ground this investigation, we introduce two subjects whose lives embody the core conflict of the book. First, there is Elias, a highly successful emergency room surgeon. His world is one of constant, high-stakes chaos. Every day, he makes life or death decisions in a rapid-fire environment. Elias represents the individual who must function at a peak cognitive level within the storm. His professional life is a masterclass in external crisis management. However, his personal life tells a different story. The relentless nature of his work has seeped into his home life, manifesting as chronic insomnia and a strained relationship with his family. His mind, trained to be hypervigilant in the operating room, cannot switch off. He is calm for the storm, but not from it. Elias's journey will trace the neurological path from acute stress to chronic anxiety, and how he learns to compartmentalize and truly detach. Our second subject is Dr. Anya Sharma, a neuroscientist specializing in the study of emotional regulation and resilience. Dr. Sharma represents the intellectual framework of this journey. She left a high-pressure research career to found a nonprofit dedicated to teaching mindfulness to first responders and inner-city youth, groups facing trauma daily. Dr. Sharma is the investigator, using cutting-edge brain imaging to map the circuitry of calm. Her work focuses on the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive control center, and its ability to modulate the amygdala, the brain's fear alarm. Her personal motivation stems from her own experience overcoming a debilitating period of academic burnout, a reminder that knowledge does not automatically confer wisdom or resilience. Together, Elias and Dr. Sharma's stories, the practical application under fire, and the scientific explanation will weave the narrative thread, demonstrating the power and potential of a trained, calm mind. They are the twin lenses through which we will examine the principles of internal mastery, one facing the immediate threat, the other decoding the biological response. The central mystery we confront is the gap between awareness and action. Why is it that in an age saturated with information on stress management, meditation, and psychological well-being, the rates of anxiety and depression continue to soar? The problem is not a lack of knowledge, but a failure of application when it matters most. In the eye of the personal storm, the initial problem is a state of mind known as cognitive fusion. Cognitive fusion is the process where a person's thoughts become so entangled with their reality that they cease to recognize them as mere thoughts. For example, the thought, "I am failing," instantly becomes the identity, "I am a failure." The thought storm is no longer observed. It is experienced as an objective truth, indistinguishable from the self. This fusion locks the individual into a reactive state, where every negative thought triggers a full-blown emotional and physiological stress response. For Elias, the surgeon, this manifests as a crushing sense of personal responsibility for every poor outcome, long after the shift is over. The thought, "I missed something," becomes an internal, all-consuming loop that prohibits sleep and recovery. His highly trained analytical mind, his greatest asset in the or, becomes a self-torturing instrument outside of it. He cannot separate the professional thought from the personal self. The mystery is why the brain, an organ designed for survival, would turn its powerful computational capacity against its host in this manner. Dr. Sharma's research points to the brain's negativity bias, an evolutionary mechanism that prioritizes threat detection. In the modern world, this bias is overstimulated by constant social and informational pressures, creating a perpetual state of low-grade alert. The initial problem, therefore, is an evolutionary mismatch. The primitive brain is reacting to a social media comment with the same panic it reserves for a saber-toothed tiger. We must learn to manually override this primal operating system. The first major clue in mastering the inner storm is the realization of the space between stimulus and response. This is the fractional moment of psychological freedom that determines whether we react impulsively or respond mindfully. For Elias, this realization arrives during a harrowing case in the emergency room, a moment that almost breaks him. A young patient, critically injured in a car accident, is rushed in. The situation is dire, requiring a complex emergency procedure. In the middle of the operation, a monitor fails, a minor technical glitch that should have been a non-issue. Yet, under the extreme pressure, Elias's internal narrative, the self-doubt from his chronic burnout, surfaces violently. "You are losing control," the thought screams, and for a split second, his hands freeze. The internal storm threatens to sabotage the external crisis management. In that frozen fraction of a second, a piece of advice from a resilience training seminar he vaguely recalls surfaces. Name the emotion. Not fix the problem, not don't panic, but name the emotion. He mentally labels the feeling: terror, self-doubt, shame. By placing a detached label on the emotional state, he successfully, if clumsily, creates a tiny distance between himself and the feeling. This act of labeling is the first major clue. Dr. Sharma explains the neuroscientific basis. This simple act is called affect labeling. When we name an emotion, the activity in the amygdala, the emotional center, actually decreases. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, the logical center, becomes more active. The cognitive labeling hijacks the emotional runaway train. It shifts the brain from a reactive, hot state to a reflective, cool state. This is not about suppressing the emotion. It's about acknowledging it and thereby claiming back the psychological real estate it tried to occupy. Elias's temporary paralysis is broken. He corrects the technical issue and saves the patient. The event is a devastating validation of the training principle. The key to external calm is not the absence of internal feeling, but the presence of observational awareness of that feeling. To truly train the mind, one must understand the origin of the storm, the neurological architecture that makes us prone to distress. The deep dive takes us into the limbic system, a network of structures deep within the brain responsible for emotion, motivation, and memory. This is the brain's ancient survival machinery. The amygdala acts as the brain's internal smoke detector, constantly scanning the environment for threats. When a threat is perceived, be it a falling stock price, an aggressive email, or a moment of surgical failure, it instantaneously triggers the fight or flight response. This is a rapid-fire, non-conscious reaction. Before you can consciously think, your heart rate accelerates, your muscles tense, and your attention narrows. This system is efficient, but often inaccurate in the modern world. The storm's origin is not the external event itself, but the immediacy and intensity of the amygdala's response. The key to calm lies in the prefrontal cortex, PFC, situated right behind the forehead. The PFC is the pinnacle of human evolution, responsible for planning, complex decision-making, and, crucially, emotional regulation. It is the calm commander. The problem is the speed of information flow. Information travels from the sensory organs to the amygdala and triggers a reaction before it reaches the PFC for a rational review. The storm starts before the commander has time to think. Dr. Sharma's research illustrates that chronic stress weakens the connection between the PFC and the amygdala. The road between the commander and the smoke detector becomes degraded, allowing the smoke detector to keep firing unchecked. The solution, then, is not to eliminate the amygdala, an impossible and undesirable task, but to rebuild and strengthen the neural highway connecting it to the PFC. This process, known as neuroplasticity, is the engine of all self-mastery. The origin of the storm is a broken connection. The deep dive reveals the path to repair and, ultimately, re-engineering the brain for calm. Early attempts at stress management often fall prey to what Dr. Sharma terms the misdirection of suppression. This is the pervasive, yet fundamentally flawed, theory that to be calmer, one must actively fight, suppress, or ignore negative thoughts and feelings. This approach is the mental equivalent of trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The effort required is exhausting, and the ball inevitably pops back up with greater force. One conflicting theory, popular in the 1980s, was pure positive thinking, the insistence on replacing every negative thought with a forced positive affirmation. While intention is good, this often leads to a state of experiential avoidance. The individual avoids the actual, uncomfortable emotion, judging it as bad, and doubling the distress by adding self-criticism for having the wrong thought in the first place. The original feeling is still there, but now buried under a layer of emotional struggle. The true misdirection is the belief that internal peace means a cessation of negative thought. This is an unrealistic goal because the brain's inherent wiring for survival means it will always generate cautionary, often negative, content. Seeking total emotional blankness is a path to failure and frustration. The modern, evidence-based approach is acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, which champions cognitive diffusion. This theory holds that the goal is not to change the content of the thought, but to change the relationship to the thought. Instead of suppressing the thought storm, you step back and observe it as a sequence of words or images, not as a command or an objective truth. This is the fundamental conflict: suppression versus observation. Elias initially tried to suppress the guilt from the operating room, only to find it amplified his insomnia. His breakthrough came when he started simply observing the thought, "I should have done more," as a sentence passing through his mind, not a declaration of his worth. The conflicting theories highlight a critical lesson. Fighting the storm is the wrong strategy. Learning to weather it without reactivity is the key. The crucial document discovered in this investigation is a profound philosophical and psychological text known as the Dichotomy of Control. It is an ancient Stoic teaching distilled primarily by Epictetus, an enslaved Greek who rose to become an influential philosopher. The document's premise is devastatingly simple, yet radically transformative. Some things are within our control, and most things are not. The dichotomy of control is a blueprint for emotional architecture. Things within our control are our opinions, judgments, desires, aversions, and, most importantly, our internal responses. Things outside our control include other people's actions, our reputation, our body's health, and external events like the weather or, for Elias, the outcome of a complex surgery. The document reveals that the entirety of human suffering stems from mistakenly identifying things outside of our control as things that are inside our control. We suffer because we demand that reality conform to our expectations, a battle we can never win. This insight is the crucial witness because it shifts the locus of the storm. The storm is not the external event. The storm is the internal protest against the external event. Dr. Sharma presents this dichotomy to Elias, who is still wrestling with the guilt of the operation in Section 5. The guilt, she explains, is his internal protest against the outcome he couldn't guarantee. The surgical skill was in his control. The final, biological response of the patient was not. This document acts as a mental filter. When a distressing event occurs, the first cognitive task is to run it through the filter. Is this in my sphere of influence? If the answer is no, the response is acceptance, which immediately starves the storm of its fuel, the futile struggle. If the answer is yes, the response is targeted action, not panic. This crucial document provides the ultimate mental map for navigating external and internal chaos, offering a path to calm based on logical psychological triage. Just as Elias begins to apply the dichotomy of control and effect labeling in his personal life, a new, unforeseen complication emerges that dramatically escalates the stakes. His hospital system undergoes a major, non-negotiable structural change, leading to longer shifts, reduced staff, and a palpable increase in patient mortality rates due to systemic overload. This is not a personal failure, but a massive, institutional crisis, a storm too large to be individualistically controlled or contained. The complication tests the limits of his newfound mental training. The dichotomy of control is theoretically sound, but in this real-world scenario, the line between what is controllable and uncontrollable blurs. He feels a professional and ethical obligation to fight the systemic issues, but the internal battle to remain calm while doing so becomes almost impossible. The sheer volume of suffering threatens to overwhelm his emotional defenses. The storm has grown from a personal squall to a Category 5 hurricane hitting his entire life. This escalation reveals a critical truth. Training the mind for calm is not a passive retreat. It is the necessary foundation for moral action during a crisis. If Elias succumbs to the panic, he becomes another victim of the system. If he remains calm, he can be a voice of reason and a source of strength for his colleagues. The stake is no longer just his personal well-being, but his ability to effectively advocate for his patients and his team. Dr. Sharma notes that this phase, characterized by sustained, unavoidable stress, often causes a phenomenon called amygdala hypertrophy. The stress response center physically grows larger, making the individual even more prone to panic. The complication demands a deeper, more rigorous application of the mental techniques, moving beyond simple labeling to a sustained practice of mindful presence. He must learn to be fully present for the suffering without absorbing it into his identity. The external pressure forces the internal training from an intellectual exercise into a necessary, life-saving discipline. The core evidence supporting the calm mind thesis is found in the physiological data. We analyze the measurable markers of the stress response, specifically focusing on heart rate variability, HRV, and cortisol levels. These objective metrics provide undeniable evidence that the mind's internal state is profoundly reflected in the body's biochemistry, and that mental training can alter this biological reality. Cortisol, known as the stress hormone, cortisol's primary function is to flood the body with energy to escape danger. In modern, chronic stress, high cortisol levels suppress the immune system, disrupt sleep, and promote weight gain. Elias's initial blood work showed dangerously elevated morning cortisol, indicative of a body permanently stuck in high alert mode, even during sleep. This is the physiological signature of the internal storm. Heart rate variability. HRV is the subtle, healthy fluctuation in the time interval between successive heartbeats. A high HRV indicates a flexible, resilient nervous system, the ability to rapidly switch from the sympathetic, fight or flight, to the parasympathetic, rest and digest, state. A low, rigid HRV is a biomarker for chronic stress and a predictor of mental and physical illness. A low HRV means the mind is, essentially, trapped in its storm. The core evidence in Part 1 is a series of controlled studies from Dr. Sharma's lab, demonstrating the impact of a simple 10-minute daily breathing practice on these metrics. Subjects performing a specific, slow, diaphragmatic breathing exercise for 8 weeks showed a significant reduction in chronic cortisol levels and a measurable increase in HRV. The seemingly simple act of controlled breathing, therefore, is not a nice addition to life. It is a direct neural intervention. It is a way of manually signaling to the vagus nerve, the major highway of the parasympathetic system, that the danger has passed. This physiological evidence confirms that the most powerful tool for calming the mind is, ironically, the disciplined control of the breath, a universal and immediate biological function. The geographical and environmental deep dive explores the concept of allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear on the body and brain resulting from chronic overactivity of stress response systems. The geography here is the sensory environment that the mind is forced to inhabit, both in the workplace and at home. For Elias, the high-stress environment of the modern hospital, the constant alarms, the fluorescent lighting, the noise pollution, the ethical strain, creates a state of perpetual allostatic overload. The environment itself is a nonstop, low-level stressor, preventing the nervous system from ever achieving a true baseline. This constant environmental pressure makes the inner storm inevitable. The mind is simply reacting to an objectively hostile landscape. The deep dive reveals the critical role of sensory inputs in maintaining or disrupting calm. Exposure to nature, even brief periods, has been shown to reduce prefrontal cortex activity associated with rumination. The presence of natural light and rhythmic, non-threatening sounds acts as a neuromodulator, gently shifting the brain away from hypervigilance. The environment is either a co-conspirator in the storm or an ally in the quest for calm. This section highlights the concept of recovery environment. Elias, guided by Dr. Sharma's principles, realizes his home environment is still mentally simulating the hospital. He has constant email pings, and his desk is cluttered with case files. His geography outside the hospital has failed to provide a contrast. The corrective action involves actively designing his environment for neurological recovery. dedicating specific no-tech zones, introducing natural soundscapes, and strictly adhering to a digital sunset. The geographical deep dive concludes that the mind cannot be calmer than its environment unless that environment is deliberately optimized for rest and recovery. External reengineering is a necessary complement to internal training. The antagonists in the journey to internal calm are not external people, but powerful, insidious forces originating from the digital and social spheres. These forces actively hijack the brain's reward system, making sustained calm exceptionally difficult to maintain. The primary opposing forces are the algorithm and the culture of busyness. The algorithm, the design architecture of social media, news feeds, and communication apps, is optimized for one thing: engagement. Engagement is maximized by two primary emotions: fear and outrage. The algorithm acts as a sophisticated, global stress inducer, feeding the mind a constant stream of high-intensity, conflict-driven information. It leverages the brain's negativity bias, Section 6, to hold attention, ensuring the amygdala is constantly firing. This force is the primary external supplier of the internal storm. It convinces the mind that the world is more dangerous, divided, and personally threatening than it actually is. The culture of busyness. This is the social antagonist, the pervasive belief that one's value is directly proportional to one's level of exhaustion and overcommitment. The antagonist is the internal voice, reinforced by societal pressure, that interprets rest as laziness and stillness as weakness. This force ensures the mind never has a chance to integrate new, calmer patterns. It demands perpetual motion, which prevents the prefrontal cortex from consolidating its regulatory strength. The mind's default mode network, which should be a time for rest and creative synthesis, is instead constantly filled with planning and worry. Understanding these antagonists is critical for Elias. He realizes his impulse to check his work email late at night is not a sign of dedication, but a psychological addiction to the low-grade dopamine hit of problem solving, a reward loop engineered by the algorithm. Defeating these forces requires not a mental skill, but a conscious, physical act of withdrawal, setting firm boundaries, deleting social apps, and actively scheduling white space into his life. The antagonists are invisible, but their effect, a perpetually stressed mind, is undeniable. The unforeseen alliance is the strange, powerful partnership between the surgeon Elias and a simple, analog tool, the journal. This alliance represents a cognitive breakthrough where the mind outsources its rumination to an external, non-judgmental container. For years, Elias had relied on his brilliant memory and internal analysis, but the trauma of the hospital was too much for his internal system to process. The betrayal, in this context, is the mind's own internal mechanism for processing trauma: rumination. Rumination is the act of endlessly replaying a distressing event, not to solve it, but to re-experience the emotional pain. The mind betrays itself by transforming a single past event into a perpetual present state. This loop is the engine of the storm, ensuring the emotional intensity never dissipates. The journal becomes Elias's alliance against this betrayal. Dr. Sharma prescribes a specific form of journaling called expressive writing, where he writes about the day's most stressful event, not focusing on fixing it, but purely on describing the raw facts and the associated feelings. This is not a list of complaints. It is a process of externalization. The neurological effect, is profound. When the thoughts are on the page, the brain no longer has to hold them in its working memory. This frees up cognitive resources in the prefrontal cortex, which can then be used for actual problem solving rather than emotional reenactment. The alliance with the journal effectively depersonalizes the storm. The thoughts are no longer his fault or his identity. They are ink on a page, external artifacts to be observed and dismissed. This act of externalization breaks the cycle of rumination. The partnership between the distressed mind and the blank page offers a crucial, low-tech escape route from the internal prison of overwhelming thought. The point of no return is reached when Elias faces a choice that determines the future of his mental health: stay in his current, high-stress position and risk total burnout, or make a radical, structural change to his professional life that honors his commitment to calm. This decision is the final examination of his training in the dichotomy of control. The moment is triggered by a significant medical error by a junior colleague, directly resulting from the chronic understaffing that Elias had warned against. While Elias is not directly responsible, the event pushes him to the edge, causing a physical collapse, a panic attack disguised as a cardiac event. This physiological crisis is the body issuing an undeniable ultimatum. At this juncture, Dr. Sharma reminds him of the Stoic principle. Don't wish that things happen as you want them to. Wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. The uncontrollable external reality, the hospital's systemic failure, will continue to happen. The internal desire to fix the unfixable is the fuel for his collapse. Elias chooses the point of no return. He resigns from his executive role, opting for a reduced, purely clinical position in a small, less chaotic regional trauma center. This is a deliberate, career-altering choice to prioritize the internal over the external success metric. It is not a retreat from the world, but a strategic retreat from the storm's epicenter. The point of no return is the conscious decision to define his life by his values, health, and presence, rather than by societal and professional expectations, power, and prestige. It is the moment when the trained mind dictates the life choices, instead of the life choices dictating the mind's state. There is no going back to the old, pathologically busy self. The midpoint twist is the realization that the storm is not the problem. The fighting of the storm is the problem. The revelation is a concept known as the second arrow in Buddhist psychology. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life, the loss, the injury, the disappointment. For Elias, this is the inevitable difficulty of a high-stakes surgical career. The second arrow is the self-inflicted pain that follows, the mental and emotional reaction to the first arrow, the guilt, the self-criticism, the rumination, the anxiety about the future. The second arrow is the true internal storm. The halfway revelation is that all the energy Elias has spent trying to prevent the initial negative feelings was wasted. The core task of training the mind is not to block the first arrow, but to learn how to never shoot the second one. This immediately reframes the entire purpose of the mental training. It is not about eliminating suffering. It is about eliminating unnecessary suffering. The twist is applied to Elias's relationship with his insomnia. He realizes he is not struggling with the fact of being awake, first arrow, but with the anxiety about being awake and the fear of the next day's fatigue, second arrow. The moment he accepts the fact of being awake, the non-negotiable reality of the moment, the frantic mental effort to force sleep dissipates. This is the paradoxical core of the twist. Surrender to the present moment's difficulty is the most active form of mental control. Dr. Sharma explains that this is a neurological shift from an avoidance motivation system to an approach motivation system, where the object of approach is simply the raw, unedited reality of the present moment. The internal struggle ends not with a victory, but with a non-resistance. The second set of clues involves the concept of meta-awareness, the realization that you have a mind and that your thoughts are not you. This is a crucial step beyond simple effect labeling. New evidence from Dr. Sharma's lab, using fMRI scans of advanced meditators, reveals a distinct neural decoupling during focused attention. The brain activity associated with the content of a thought, e.g., the word failure, is separate from the activity associated with the awareness of having that thought. The second set of clues is the cultivation of this inner witness, the observing self, which is distinct from the thinking self. The practical technique is called diffusion language. Elias is taught to change the internal script from "I am angry" to "I am having the thought that I am angry," or even shorter, "I notice anger." This linguistic frame is the operational key to meta-awareness. It subtly, but powerfully, inserts the psychological space necessary to prevent cognitive fusion. It is a mental judo move, using the weight of the thought against itself. The goal is to treat the mind's output like a weather report. Sometimes it predicts sun, sometimes it predicts a hurricane, but the report is never the weather itself. This new evidence provides the mind with a critical, permanent function, an inner narrator whose sole job is to observe the passing parade of thoughts without judgment or attachment. This witness cannot be harmed by the storm's content because it operates at a level of awareness above the storm. It is the beginning of true, unshakable self-identification with the calm, observing self, rather than the chaotic, thinking self. The psychological and social impact of training the mind for calm is not merely a reduction in personal stress. It is a measurable increase in compassion. The storm inside consumes all available psychological resources. A calm mind, by contrast, creates a surplus. When Elias was in the throes of burnout, his psychological tunnel vision led to irritability, emotional detachment from his family, and a hypercritical stance toward his colleagues. The internal storm made him socially isolated and emotionally unavailable. This is the negative social impact of an untamed mind, a constant projection of inner turmoil onto the external world. The trained, calmer mind fundamentally shifts this dynamic. By defusing from his own negative internal chatter, Elias stops projecting that self-criticism outward. His ability to observe his own emotional volatility without judgment extends to his observation of others. He begins to see a junior colleague's mistake, not as a moral or intellectual failure, but as a predictable outcome of the same systemic pressure that nearly broke him. This surplus of psychological space translates directly into increased empathy and patience. Dr. Sharma's research shows that the same neural pathways involved in self-compassion are co-activated during compassion for others. The calmer mind sees the shared humanity in struggle, recognizing the second arrow in others' behavior. The result is a profound social transformation. Elias becomes a better, more supportive mentor, a more present father, and a more effective leader, not because he tried to be, but because he stopped being consumed by himself. The ultimate social impact of internal calm is the ability to show up for others without the demand that they first fix or validate your own internal state. The second part of the core evidence focuses on the neurobiological and anatomical changes that occur with sustained mental training. This moves beyond temporary hormonal changes to illustrate actual structural and functional changes in the brain, the true embodiment of neuroplasticity, Section 6. The key evidence is the demonstrable increase in the volume of gray matter in specific brain regions. Long-term practitioners of mindfulness and emotional regulation techniques show increased gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. PFC, the calm commander, physically grows stronger, improving its executive function, working memory, and, most importantly, its ability to inhibit the amygdala's fear response. This is the neurological signature of strengthened self-control and sustained attention. Decreased density in the amygdala. The smoke detector physically shrinks in density, indicating that it is firing less often and less intensely. The mind is literally becoming less reactive to perceived threats. Strengthened connectivity. Analysis shows an increase in the white matter connecting the PFC and the amygdala. A superhighway of regulation is built. This ensures that the rational, executive brain can intercept and calm the emotional, reactive brain with greater speed and efficiency. This anatomical data serves as the ultimate validation of the training. The calm mind is not a philosophical ideal or a fleeting emotional state. It is a measurable, physically robust biological reality. Elias's initial brain fog and irritability were symptoms of a stressed, disorganized brain. His sustained practice of diffusion and acceptance is literally reshaping his neural architecture. Analysis of core evidence part 2 proves that the pursuit of calm is a profound act of self-reengineering, providing tangible, verifiable data for the most skeptical mind. The attempt to cover up or suppress the truth of internal storm management comes from the powerful, pervasive cultural narrative of quick fixes and performance hacking. This is the contemporary mechanism that prevents people from committing to the deep, slow, effortful work of sustained internal change. The suppression takes the form of endless distraction, the constant search for a technological or pharmacological bypass for genuine psychological work. The truth that is suppressed is the reality that the calm mind is the result of daily, boring, repetitive practice. There is no shortcut. The narrative of performance hacking, the idea that mental training is only a tool to extract more productivity, is particularly insidious. It co-opts the language of mindfulness, e.g., meditate to focus for profit, but strips it of its core ethical and psychological purpose, e.g., meditate to relieve suffering. This suppression ultimately undermines the goal, as a mind trained purely for external performance remains reactive and fragile when performance inevitably fails. Dr. Sharma and Elias discuss this suppression in the context of the medical field's reliance on quick pharmaceutical interventions for anxiety. While necessary in some cases, the institutional focus often suppresses the deeper truth: the mind is trainable. The cover-up is the lie that genuine, lasting calm can be purchased or quickly consumed, rather than slowly built from the ground up. The truth that must be embraced is the effortful simplicity of the practices, the 10 minutes of conscious breathing, the 2 minutes of effect labeling. The cultural attempt to suppress this simplicity is the final frontier in the battle for mental health. The investigation now deepens into the concept of psychological flexibility, the ultimate measure of the trained mind. Psychological flexibility is the ability to fully contact the present moment as a conscious human being and, based on what the situation affords, to change or persist in behavior in the service of chosen values. It is the ultimate tool for navigating a non-negotiable, unpredictable external world. The pursuit is to move Elias from simply reacting calmly to acting purposefully from a place of calm. This involves integrating all the previous steps, the dichotomy of control, diffusion language, and the acceptance of the second arrow. Dr. Sharma introduces the concept of value-driven action. The key is not to pursue a feeling of calm, which is an external state, but to pursue a life built on internal values, which is an internal choice. Elias identifies his core values as integrity and presence. The deepening investigation reveals that when the storm hits, the mind's automatic reaction is to move away from values. For Elias, panic made him irritable and professionally defensive, pushing him away from presence and integrity. The trained mind reverses this. When a difficult feeling arises, the pursuit is to consciously ask, if I acted from my value of integrity right now, what would I do? The feeling of discomfort is still present, but the action is guided by a higher purpose. The investigation concludes that the calm mind is not passive. It is a highly active, values-guided mind. The internal storm's function is now redefined. It is no longer a stop sign, but a compass that points toward the deepest, most important values. A parallel storyline is introduced to illustrate the universality of the mind's struggle, using the example of a world-class Olympic diver, Lena. Lena's performance is not dictated by her physical ability, but by a psychological phenomenon known as the yips, a sudden, inexplicable failure of fine motor skills under pressure, rooted entirely in anxiety and fear of failure. Lena's internal storm manifests as a physical betrayal. Before a dive, her mind would fuse with the thought, "You will miss the water." This single thought would trigger a catastrophic surge of adrenaline, causing her muscles to lock up and her movement to become hesitant and rigid. She was technically perfect, but mentally paralyzed. The parallel storyline shows her path to calm, which mirrors Elias's, but is framed physically. Her coach, trained in psychological techniques, forces her to use the concept of mindful repetition. She is instructed to practice her dives not with the goal of perfection, but with the sole purpose of observing the fear as it arises on the platform. The objective is to make 10 dives, and for each one, to mentally say, "I noticed the fear in my stomach," before stepping off. This parallel story provides crucial context. The storm is indifferent to the field of endeavor. Whether a surgeon's knife or a diver's takeoff, the mechanism of mental collapse is identical: cognitive fusion with a negative thought. Lena's success, when she finally achieves a gold medal winning dive, is a testament to the power of the observing self. Her victory is not the successful dive, but the ability to execute the dive while observing the thought, "You will miss the water," without allowing the thought to control her muscles. The parallel story proves that the journey to calm is the one, unified master key to performance in all high-stakes human activity. The intellectual confrontation occurs in a public debate where Dr. Sharma challenges a prominent, traditional psychologist who argues that anxiety is purely a chemical imbalance requiring immediate and singular pharmacological treatment. The confrontation is a battle between the static model of the mind, the broken brain model, and the dynamic model, the trainable brain model. The traditional view, presented by the antagonist, is that the storm is a mechanical failure, and the solution must be mechanical, a pill to correct the neurochemistry. Dr. Sharma's argument is that while chemistry is involved, the primary cause of the chronic storm is behavioral and environmental. It is a learned response, reinforced by a modern life of constant stimulation and avoidance. Dr. Sharma uses the evidence of neuroplasticity, section 18, to confront the static model. She argues that viewing anxiety purely as a chemical problem is a form of intellectual suppression, section 19, which denies the patient agency. If the storm is solely a chemical fault, the individual is a passive victim. If the storm is a neurological pattern of excessive reactivity, the individual is an active participant in their own recovery through training. The confrontation climaxes with her presenting Elias's HRV data and prefrontal cortex growth as evidence. His brain's physical structure changed, she asserts, not primarily through medication, but through conscious, disciplined mental practice. This intellectual battle is critical because it moves the dialogue from "what's wrong with me" to "what skills do I need to learn." The confrontation solidifies the core message. Training the mind is a demanding, active intellectual responsibility, not a passive medical state. The true power lies in the mind's capacity to heal and reshape itself. The major loss Elias experiences is the loss of his lifelong illusion of emotional immunity. This is the painful, but necessary, sacrifice that marks his final maturation. Throughout his career, he believed his professional competence, his ability to remain calm under pressure, meant he was immune to the psychological toll of trauma. He maintained a false front of unbreakable composure, which became a psychological cage. The sacrifice is his willingness to finally embrace and process the grief, fear, and moral injury he had accumulated over a decade in the emergency room. This is not a loss of external status, but the internal loss of his self-concept as the unfeeling, invincible hero. The sacrifice is the permission he gives himself to be genuinely human and vulnerable. This loss occurs as Elias is mentoring his replacement in his old executive role. He watches the younger surgeon make the same mistakes of overcommitment and emotional suppression, seeing his own past reflected back. In a moment of quiet candor, Elias chooses to share his own story of near collapse and the subsequent mental training. This act of vulnerability is the sacrifice of his old, armored identity. Dr. Sharma notes that vulnerability is the ultimate act of calm in a social context. It requires an unshakable inner peace to allow others to see your imperfections without fearing their judgment. By sacrificing the need for the illusion of control, Elias gains true psychological strength. The loss of his self-imposed immunity is the final, essential step in training his mind. He loses the mask of perfection but gains the authenticity of unshakable, human calm. The final pieces of the puzzle fall into place with the seamless integration of the three core mental practices into Elias's daily life, transforming them from techniques into a default mode of being. The three final pieces are radical acceptance, the practice of gratitude, and scheduled stillness. Radical acceptance. This is the practical application of the dichotomy of control and the second arrow. It is the moment-to-moment commitment to fully acknowledge the non-negotiable reality of the present. For Elias, this means accepting a slow day in his new regional clinic as valuable, not a waste of his surgical talent. It is the end of the internal protest. The practice of gratitude, scientifically, is a powerful antidote to the negativity bias. It is not forced optimism, but a conscious act of shifting focus to the brain's reward centers. Elias starts a practice of naming three concrete, non-monetary things he is grateful for each evening. This is a deliberate, daily rewiring of the brain's default setting from threat detection to resource appreciation. Scheduled stillness. This is the consistent, non-negotiable practice of meditation and breath work, now completely divorced from performance or stress reduction goals. It is an act of maintenance, like brushing one's teeth. Elias's 10-minute morning session is no longer a tool to fix a problem, but a sacred, dedicated time to observe and reside in his inner calm. These three pieces form a complete feedback loop. Acceptance removes the storm's fuel. Gratitude shifts the brain's emotional frequency. Scheduled stillness maintains the neural connection between the calm commander, PFC, and the smoke detector, amygdala. The storm still comes, but the systems are in place to weather it automatically. The mind is finally trained, its function now optimized for enduring, resourceful calm. The primary conclusion of this entire investigation is that the highest form of human strength is not the ability to withstand external pressure, but the quiet, disciplined capacity to choose non-reaction to the pressure. The ultimate truth revealed is that the mind is the only battlefield that truly matters, and the choice is always available to step off that battlefield. The calm that Elias and Lino achieved is not an innate gift. It is a meticulously constructed skill set. The truth is found in the synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience. The storm is not real. The emotional tempest is a transient, self-generated narrative, not an objective reality. Its power relies entirely on the individual's belief in its inherent truth. The power is always in the response. The external world is chaotic and cruel, but the internal world of judgment, opinion, and value-driven action is perfectly governable. Training is maintenance. Just like physical fitness, mental calm requires continuous, daily, non-negotiable practice. The final scene of The Truth Revealed finds Elias back in a high-pressure situation, but this time, he is watching the internal storm unfold with complete detachment. A monitor flatlines. The room descends into controlled chaos. His mind registers the information. The familiar spike of adrenaline occurs, but the second arrow is not fired. He acts with swift, precise judgment, guided only by his value of integrity and presence. The truth is revealed in the unperturbed clarity of his hands and voice. He is calmer than his storm because he is no longer in the storm. He is the unmoving rock upon which the waves of emotion crash and harmlessly recede. The immediate consequences of Elias's transformation ripple outward, primarily affecting his relationship with his family. The most immediate aftermath is the shift from a hero dynamic to a human dynamic. His wife, who had grown accustomed to his emotionally walled-off, hypervigilant intensity, experiences a profound, positive change. The immediate consequence is a restoration of presence. When Elias walks through the door, his surgical day remains in the hospital. He has a structured ritual to leave the work, literally, in the entryway. This ritual, a moment of breath work and a mental transition, signals to his brain and to his family that the commander is off duty. Furthermore, his children benefit from a father who is no longer reactive. Minor frustrations, a spilled glass, a demanding request, are met with an understanding nod, not an irritable snap. The calm mind breeds a calm environment. The emotional state of the primary caregiver is the most potent immediate consequence of this training, fundamentally altering the psychological landscape of the home. Professionally, the immediate aftermath of his move to the regional trauma center is an unexpected wave of inquiries from his former colleagues, recognizing the quality of his work and the stability of his temperament. They see that his career shift was not a failure, but a demonstration of psychological strength. The immediate consequence is that he becomes an unintended, unpretentious model of resilience, proving that true professional success must be undergirded by sustainable internal peace. The long-term legacy of the mind training is its profound effect on personal narrative. The legacy is not what the person achieved externally, but the story they tell themselves internally about their life and their worth. Elias's old narrative was one of perpetual struggle and self-flagellation. I must constantly perform to be worthy. His long-term legacy is a new narrative of self-acceptance and resourceful durability. I am inherently worthy, and my true strength is my ability to respond from a place of values. This new narrative inoculates him against future inevitable failures and setbacks. Dr. Sharma's long-term impact is the integration of these resilience techniques into institutional settings. Her nonprofit expands, and the core principles of diffusion, acceptance, and value-driven action are adopted by police departments, schools, and major corporations. Her legacy is the mainstreaming of mental training as a core life skill rather than a remedial therapy. The long-term impact on the culture at large is a slow, steady erosion of the culture of busyness, Section 12. As leaders like Elias demonstrate that sustained high-level performance is only possible from a position of sustained calm, the value system begins to shift. The long-term legacy is the simple truth that mental health is not the absence of stress, but the presence of skills that allow one to skillfully navigate stress without sacrificing their values or their well-being. It is the enduring power of a story where the protagonist learns to master the self, not the world. The modern relevance of training the mind to be calmer than its storm is directly tied to the escalating complexity of the 21st century environment, the rise of artificial intelligence, and the speed of technological change. The essential human skill that AI cannot replicate is conscious choice in the face of ambiguity. The modern world is characterized by exponential change, creating a perpetual state of future shock anxiety. The human mind is not designed to process change at this velocity. The risk is that the untrained mind will default to fear and resistance, leading to paralysis. The calm mind, trained in acceptance and diffusion, is the only human apparatus fit for this future. It can observe the chaos of change, the storm, without fusing with the fear-based thoughts about it. This allows for clear, strategic thinking and adaptability. The training's modern relevance is its status as the master adaptability skill. Dr. Sharma notes that as AI takes over predictable tasks, the uniquely human value will be judgment, creativity, and emotional intelligence, all of which require a deep, underlying internal calm to flourish. The person who can remain unperturbed by the storm of technological disruption is the one who will be able to shape it. The calmness is a competitive edge, not merely a personal comfort. It is the neurological foundation for leadership in a world defined by volatility and complexity. The trained mind is not escaping the future. it is preparing to lead it. Despite the scientific breakthroughs and personal transformations, a lingering mystery remains: the persistent, individual nature of the initial internal storm's intensity. Why are some minds inherently more prone to catastrophic anxiety, even when genetic and environmental factors seem similar? The unanswered question is the precise, unique signature of individual trauma and its long-term epigenetic effect. While we understand that the brain is trainable, the starting point of the training, the baseline level of fear and reactivity, varies dramatically from person to person. Two people can face the same external event, but one's amygdala screams in panic while the other's registers mild concern. The mystery encourages humility in the face of psychological science. We can provide the tools, but we must acknowledge that the journey for the trauma survivor, or the person with a deeply ingrained genetic predisposition for anxiety, is disproportionately harder. The legacy of the storm, the deep grooves carved by early life experience, remains a lingering question mark in the pursuit of universal, effortless calm. This mystery demands a continuous, gentle approach to self-improvement. It prevents the practitioner of calm from succumbing to a new form of judgment, self-criticism for not being calm enough. The lingering mystery reminds us that the goal is not perfection or the elimination of all internal struggle, but the compassionate acceptance of the struggle itself. The storm may be genetically or traumatically louder for some, but the choice to be calmer than it remains universal. The journey to train your mind to be calmer than your storm is an investigation into the nature of freedom. It is the realization that the greatest prison is not external circumstance, but the mind's own unchecked, reactive interpretation of that circumstance. The entire script boils down to a three-part protocol. 1. Acknowledge and separate. Implement the dichotomy of control, Section 8, and diffusion language, Section 16. The storm exists, but it is not you. This is the moment of meta-awareness that stops the second arrow, Section 15. 2. Regulate and ground. Use the immediate, physical tools of controlled breathing, Section 10, and environmental restructuring, Section 11, to manually signal safety to the nervous system. This is the physiological re-engineering of the brain, Section 18. 3. Act and commit. Use the calm mind as a foundation for value-driven action, Section 20. Your purpose is not to feel good, but to act well. Elias's transformation proves the core truth. You cannot stop the waves from coming, but you can choose to ride them. The final thought is a quiet injunction. The external world will forever be loud, chaotic, and beyond your ultimate control. The true, lasting sanctuary is not a place you can travel to, nor a state you can purchase, but a skill you must tirelessly build within. This is the enduring power of the trained mind, to look out upon the most violent storm and realize that, at its core, you are the calmest thing in the room. The work is lifelong. The peace is absolute.